All right. So, yeah, I think we're live. And hello, everybody. It is the Dark Conservatarian, if I can articulate my words right. And I am here so far with the Loudmouth Reviews and our special guest co-host, Rational Outlaw. Say hi, y'all.
Hi,
Loudmouth?
can you hear me?
Hello. Hello.
Yeah, I'm sure that they can hear you. Loudmouth?
Can you hear
Hello.
me?
I just played the audio right there. But anyway, so in recent news, Notre Dame just caught fire. What we're going to mainly be talking about is the aftermath, the fire that lit a blaze on the internets right afterwards regarding some comments made by Ben Shapiro primarily, but also comments that were made by multiple people that they got, I guess, essentially misrepresented. Some of them, anyways. And
Mhm.
also the Sri Lanka bombing that happened over Easter and Yemen, Trump vetoing to pull out of Yemen. So, all of that. And how I came across this story, and so, okay, I'm trying to gather my thoughts here. So I actually did something that I don't normally do on these episodes of Strike Force. I actually pre-read the two articles that we are going to be featuring as far as Washington Post smearing Ben Shapiro.
Mhm.
Something that I don't normally do, so don't get used to that. But yes, originally, so here's the timeline. Ben Shapiro makes his own show covering the Notre Dame story and basically talking about the symbolism and the history behind Notre Dame, how it is a great, I guess, icon of Western culture and Judeo Christian values, as he puts it. And then, as soon as he's done with his show, Washington Post does their hit piece. This Talia Lavin character, who is a very incredible a writer known throughout
There's
the
an
interwebs.
understatement of the year. It's amazing that bitch has the job. She smeared an innocent TSA agent as being a Nazi.
I thought it was ice. Well,
Oh,
whatever it was, but yeah, that is the general story. Nonetheless, is that she smeared somebody of being a Nazi. But yeah, she essentially goes crying out to everybody for dog whistling and so on and so forth. And once this article was posted, Ben Shapiro made his own response to it on Twitter, saying this from Chick in Kiev. That's the Twitter handle for Talia Lavin. In the Washington Post is the sheerest form of disgusting bullshit. I blamed no one for the Notre Dame fire, since it was an accident by all available evidence, and imputing malicious intent to me is simply gross. Now, how I came across this story was originally by a loudmouth sharing a tweet made by Media Matters, like somewhere further down the thread, actually, but I cannot find it at the moment. And when I saw this thread here myself, I thought for myself that I ought to look at the original program. That being, of course,
re-
this one right
read the
here.
tweet I made in response to it. You'll, all right, I think I'm actually quite proud of it.
I think I would have to go back and look at the ASP Asylum to be able to find it. But
Yeah, read it.
lots and lots of responses. I think it was actually underneath this specific tweet. The second, oh fuck you and the Burro you rode in on.
Yes.
Um, if I could find loudmouth reviews.
Yeah, I'll send it. Here, I'll send
Yeah,
it.
you'll have to send it on the SFN group chat or something. But anyway, so yeah, and thanks to Loudmouth, this is how that I was originally informed on this. And when I saw this thread, I thought to myself that I gotta confirm to see what Ben Shapiro was actually saying in that program. And so I looked back at this episode of the Ben Shapiro show, and I found out that he did not have any calls or incitements of violence in his program right there.
Hey,
So,
I posted in the SSN.
SFN.
Yep.
All right. 1 second. Huh. I don't know what's the deal here. Either they deleted the tweet that you responded to or something. You're looking at the screen right now, Loudmouth?
Yeah, just read the tweet.
What world do we live in where a leftist journalist can't slander an innocent person without receiving a backlash for their malicious behavior? Yeah, that's another part of the story is Talia Lavin,
Yeah.
like,
I think
claiming
that sums it up well.
big victim mentality. Exactly.
Yeah, she has a victim mentality. She always cries the victim whenever she gets a backlash. But she always uses her platform to maliciously slander and bully people. That's basically the character of a cry bully. Somebody who bullies others and then plays the victim when they get called out for their bullying.
Yeah. And
Mm-hmm.
speaking of people that are essentially doubling down on the lying, how I came across this tweet is that I was actually looking at Owen McDonald's page, and imagine my shock knowing of how much of a habitual and professional smear artist he is. He actually gone retweeting this particular tweet right here, where this Tommy Coca-Cola guy says, "Look how mean to me they're being." Just taking a screen cap, not even retweeting the actual tweet, because I guess he did not want to get the backlash of possibly Ben Shapiro and all of his followers, maybe. But yeah, Ben Shapiro says, guys are just media watchdogs, not pathetic partisan smear artists funded by Democratic donors. And
Mm-hmm.
he paraphrases that as, look how mean to me they're being. Apparently, when you want to be able to clear up your own record and destroy other people's lives, that's you saying, oh, my hurt little feelings. What kind of a world are we living in when that is the case?
Yeah, exactly. Washington Post quote unquote journalists and all other manner of all other leftists on the internet should be allowed to slander whoever they want and never receive any kind of criticisms for the lives they ruin, the reputations they destroy, or the outright lies they peddle to the public.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at the expression on Ben Shapiro's face right here, it's just like fucking really. The look on his face is just like really. And Pumpkin Row in the chat says, why look at that fuckwit's page? I think he's referring to Owen McDonald. That's just torturing yourself. I agree, Pumpkin. I do not know why I do it, but I don't do it that often. Just FYI. This is like the show that Ben Shapiro actually did in response to all the drama that went down. And yeah, again, I can like testify that Ben Shapiro did not have any incitements of violence. And here's an article from the Washington Examiner talking about the very original article from the Washington Post smearing Ben Shapiro. And I'm not going to read the whole article, but here's a little excerpt that Washington Examiner pulls out from Washington Post. Fast-talking far-right pundit Ben Shapiro called Notre Dame a monument to Western civilization and Judeo-Christian heritage. Given the already raging rumors about potential Muslim involvement, these tweets evoke the specter of a war between Islam and the West that is already part of numerous far-right narratives. It was also a central thread in the manifesto of Name Redacted, referring to the Christchurch shooter right there, the alleged Christchurch, New Zealand shooter. Richard Spencer, professional racist and coiner of the term alt-right, openly advocated for such warfare, stating and misspelling his hopes that the fire would spur the white man into action to seize power in his countries, in Europe, in the world, and declaring such an insurgence a glorious purpose. Now, Richard Spencer is doing... It does seem to be more outright advocating for violence, but to be lumping in Ben Shapiro with that, again, I looked at the original program, and he wasn't calling on any violence or anything like that. But that's the implication.
Well,
that,
leftists believe that speech is violence, so disagreeing with them in their sick minds is violence.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently just talking about Judeo-Christian heritage and Western culture and whatnot is dog whistling for white nationalism, or dog whistling white nationalism in general.
I mean, I just really hope she didn't break her back reaching that hard.
Mm.
Yeah. There was actually another tweet that Owen ended up retweeting in his page, but I'm not going to dare look at that because I'm not going to torture myself with that. But you get the point. This is kind of why that I made the rant video that I posted a few days ago, talking about why I think that dog whistles are essentially bullshit. Rational Outlaw, I know, watch that video, but I don't know about you, Loudmouth. But Yeah, any further comments that you guys would like to give regarding Washington Post's bullcrap?
No, it's pretty much summed up. It's just bullcrap. Like a lot of the articles trying to smear certain people by the left wing mainstream media.
Mm-hmm. As far as dog whistles of white nationalism, Richard Spencer, I will say, is being more outright with his advocacy on white nationalism, but that's obvious things obvious. But
Hmm.
anyway, that's kind of all I wanted to talk about on that regard. Nothing real big, but just it's worth pointing out as another example as to how untrustworthy the Washington Post is. And you would do yourself better just looking at a different news site for reading Washington Post. Now, I have occasionally watched Washington Post, or read Washington Post, but that's more out of the sake of responding to their articles more than anything else. So, let's look at the chat here. Pumpkin Rose says, Owen's debate with you was a mess. I could barely finish the thing. The guy has no interest in the exchange of ideas, only in spreading his narrative. It's disgusting. Yeah, I'll just double down on his assertions, Pumpkin Row. Richard Spencer is just a shill. The alt-right don't even like the guy. He only got attention from the state media so that the government could paint the entire alt-right movement as racists. Okay. If you watch his debate with Sargon, he can't even properly articulate his position. Exactly. Richard Spencer is an overrated dumbass, but as far as the whole how well he aligns with alt-right, I don't know. I'll just leave that as is. I kind of disagree, but whatever. So anyway, moving on to talking about the Sri Lanka bombing. As you all might have heard, Sri Lanka was hit over Easter, and that is quite a pity as well, because on Easter as well, a very Christian holiday done to some churches. Pity. And I just noticed that Loudmouth has left, so yeah, pretty much all he wanted to talk about, all I knew that he, for certain that he was going to want to talk about was Washington Post, but I'm glad that we could get his 2 cents in on that particular issue.
Hmm.
And Rational Outlaw, if you want to chime in when I'm reading the article here, if you want to interject and give your 2 cents on what I'm reading, don't be afraid to do so.
Okay.
Sri Lanka Easter bombings aimed at Christians, terrorists described as religious extremists. Sri Lanka police declared an overnight curfew after Easter Sunday's deadly bombing spree targeting churches and five-star hotels. The country's prime minister confirmed that authorities had received prior warning about the possibility of a terrorist attack. Police say at least 290 people were killed in the coordinated blasts, some of which were carried out by suicide bombers. Most victims were Sri Lankans, but several dozen foreigners also died. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo confirmed that several U.S. citizens are among the dead. Other nations whose nationals were killed, according to their governments, include Britain, Portugal, Turkey, the Netherlands, and China. These vile attacks are a stark reminder of why the United States remains resolved in our fight to defeat terrorism, Pompeo said in a statement. We stand with the Sri Lankan government and people as they confront violent extremism and have offered our assistance as they work to bring the perpetrators to justice. More than 500 people were injured in the 8 explosions, most of which occurred in Colombo, the capital and largest city of the Indian Ocean island nation. A possible 9th blast was averted when a pipe bomb hidden in a bag near the main international airport was found and destroyed by Air Force personnel. According to South Asia terrorism monitors, this was the first terrorist attack in Sri Lanka since the country emerged from a long and deadly civil war in 2009 between the majority ethnic Sinhalese Buddhist majority and the predominantly Hindu Tamil ethnic minority. Well, welcome to the global stage, Sri Lanka. And a rude welcome it is.
Mm-hmm.
And hello there, Common Neffel. State Minister of Defense Ruan I don't think I'm going to even try to pronounce that. Wijewardene. Ruan Wijawardine.
I can't blame you trying to pronounce that.
Described the perpetrators as religious extremists without identifying the religion, and said most of the explosions were caused by suicide bombers. We shall not give any chance. Now, I'm just going to say right now that I'm not going to try to politicize this based off of religion. Just me personally. I mean, it's just wrong in general, no matter how you paint it. Be it Christian on Christian violence, Muslim on Christian violence, so forth. Or even whatever religion it was in India that was like killing Hindus. I can't remember what it was, but do you know what I'm talking about there, Rational Outlaw?
I can understand that. However, there is some things wrong because I mean, I think there is some point to bring out though, pointing to what is causing the majority of terrorism. The majority of terrorism is Muslims, mostly on other Muslims, but they do it also on other religions like Christians and Jews. And another thing I found that was kind of not very great from the political leaders in the United States, saying that it was, and the people who were killed were Easter worshippers, rather than referring to them as Christians.
Easter worshippers? I cringe.
Yeah, and it makes sense as to why they would say that. Not that it's good, I'm saying, but it makes sense why, because they don't want to point out the fact that they're Christians and that it was Muslims who killed Christians, and the whole messes up with their that Christians are the oppressors kind of thing.
Easter worshippers, like it's not even like Christians are worshiping Easter, the holiday. They're worshiping who the holiday is focused around, for crying out loud.
Mm-hmm.
It's just utterly ridiculous and cringy and whatnot. So anyway, we shall not give any chance for these extremist groups to operate, he told reporters. We will go after them, whatever religious extremism, that they are following, excuse me, he added, saying the perpetrators had been identified and would be apprehended shortly. By early Monday, the number of suspects in custody had reached 24, police confirmed. Christians and tourists were the intended victims of the terrorists, who struck on the most significant day of the Christian calendar. As to whether or not that, I don't know. I think that Christmas is very high up there, so one of them is first, one of them is second. Just wanted to say that. The first bombs exploded in 3 churches, 2 Roman Catholics and 1 Protestant, during Easter morning services. They are the St. Anthony's Shrine in Colombo, St. Sebastian's Church in Negombo, a predominant Catholic town north of the capital, and Zion Church, an evangelical denomination in Batticaloa on Sri Lanka's east coast. The 2 Catholic churches accounted for the greatest loss of life of all of the buildings hit. Also targeted were 4 hotels in Colombo, the Cinnamon Grand. That sounds like an extra large cinnamon bun. I don't know about you. the Shangri-La, the Kingsbury, and the Tropical Inn. Hours after the initial blasts, there was another explosion at a housing complex in a Colombo neighborhood, which was reportedly detonated by a suicide bomber as police closed in on suspects. 7 suspects were arrested at that property. Sri Lanka Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe, probably butchering the name again, in a later statement confirmed that 3 brave police officers sacrificed their lives in the process of apprehending some of the suspects. Wickremesinghe said authorities had received prior information on the possibility of an attack, but that neither he nor the cabinet had been adequately informed. A serious issue is that though information had been received earlier, not enough attention had been paid. The National Business News Service, Economy Next, quoted him as saying, "We have to look deeper into this." Religious tensions. Sri Lanka has a population of 22.5 million and is a little larger in size than West Virginia. Only that much bigger, huh? Kind of a small, yeah. According to U.S. government data, Only around 7% of the population is Christian, mostly Catholic. Buddhists account for the majority of Sri Lankans, about 70%, while 12% are Hindus, and just under 10% are Muslims, mostly Sunnis.
Hmm.
Well, okay, I just remember what I was wanting to say earlier. But do you know what I'm talking about? What I'm trying to refer to when I say that there was there was some form of terrorism. Like it wasn't Muslim terrorists, but there was some other religious type of terrorist that was like trying to kill off Hindus in India or something like
Hmm.
that.
I
Structured in
don't
India.
know of any. I only know of Muslims doing that. Really, I don't know any other religion that would do that to Hindus. Hmm.
Maybe I'm getting it wrong or something.
Could have been another sect of Islam because there are multiple sects that maybe you read.
Possibly. Until the conflict ended in 2009, well over 60,000 people were killed in a 26-year civil war between the majority government and the separatist Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam, LTTE, a U.S. designated foreign terrorist organization fighting for a separate state in the north and east of the island. Wait a minute. A U.S. designated foreign terrorist organization? Um, I don't know what exactly they mean by U.S. designated. Like, U.S. was just designating them as a terrorist group. I mean, I would think that if they are like committing violence in the name of a political movement, that just by definition they are a terrorist, whether or not the U.S. designates them as that particularly or not. Um, The LTTE became infamous for suicide bombings, including the use of suicide belts and ramming attacks using explosive laden small boats. Well before the tactics became more widely known as a result of the actions of Al Qaeda and other radical Sunni Islamic groups. Last January, Sri Lankan police investigating the vandalizing of Buddhist statues arrested 4 men attached to a newly formed radical Muslim group. Economy Next reported at the time. The arrests led to the discovery of 220 pounds of high explosive and a large number of detonators hidden in the country's northwest. Whoever the perpetrators turned out to be, ISIS sympathizers on social media celebrated news of the carnage, characterizing the bombings as vengeance for attacks on Muslims. Unassociated parties, like ISIS is just applying collectivist mentality on this
Hmm.
whole issue right here. It's kind of in the same way when it comes to people calling for reparations and whatnot. Hello,
Mhm.
Scorch, and hello, Red Feather. Um, and it doesn't seem that ISIS is actually taking credit for this, because I know of how ISIS likes to very flagrantly and proudly take credit for a lot of terrorist bombing. So I'm just going to give the benefit of the doubt that this particular bombing right here was in fact not ISIS connected. Excuse me. Red Feather says, "What? Really? That's disgusting." Yeah, a collectivist mindset is always disgusting in my mind. In his televised statement, Wickremesinghe pledged to ensure that terrorism does not lift its head in Sri Lanka. We cannot allow that, and we are prepared to take all measures necessary to ensure that terrorism is contained and wiped out in this country. He described the suspects as Sri Lankan, but also said the authorities would need the help of other governments in the region to examine the possible overseas links of this terrorist group. Wickremesinghe also urged people to support the security services and ensure there is no miscommunication which leads to other incidents and diverts the security forces' attention away from the investigation. Sri Lanka has a poor record of religious tolerance. The State Department's most recent report on international religious freedom, covering 2017, cites 97 documented attacks or incidents of intimidation targeting Christians in 2017, and reports of dozens of attacks on mosques and Muslim prayer rooms. End of article. And as far as that last paragraph goes, I mean, as long as the government itself is like trying to arrest and maybe even give the death penalty to anyone that is like committing these religious fueled uh, hate crimes, I guess you could call them, and is actually not sanctioning and allowing this shit, well then I don't see how much better Sri Lanka could get as far as that goes. The Sri Lankan government, I mean. It just seems to be more of a rot of the society, of the culture, of the people, more than anything else. Or at least individuals amongst the people, anyways. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you only said only 10% of the population is Muslim.
Yeah, that's around what they said. I think it was like 7%. Yeah, assuming that it was like Muslims that actually did do the attacks. Anyways, close that ad. Common Neffel in the chat says, my sympathy for those people are nil at best. Okay. Red Feather says, I thought the police said it was a coordinated attack and that they got a tip weeks ago. I think that very article did say... wait, I got the very same article pulled up twice for some reason. I think they did say in that article, Red Feather, that this was a coordinated attack, but they haven't been able to like connect it to any particular political motivation as far as this brand of terrorism goes. I didn't celebrate when all the mosques got shot up in New Zealand. Yeah, no sane person did. Not even the evil conservatives, leftists. Speaking of conservatives, there's Ben Shapiro's face right there. Again. So, I gotta ask you, Rash, what have you heard of Trump regarding Yemen?
I actually haven't heard much about it. I didn't even know that happened until you told me, and I looked it up.
Yeah.
A little.
I heard about this vaguely about a week ago, and I know that my 2 cents has done his own today with 2 cents on this whole issue. At least he mentioned that was going to be one of the issues. I didn't actually watch the show, but yeah, that's primarily how I heard of it. I think was through the ANCAP circles that I am in. I knew it was bound to happen eventually, says the Common Neffel. What do you mean you knew it was bound to happen? Are you referring to the Sri Lanka bombing, or are you talking about the Yemen situation? But anyway, so I am overall non-interventionist when it comes to foreign policy, so this is a slight disappointment to me, but I do not know the exact details, so we shall dive deep into it right now. As from the Washington Examiner, it is titled, Trump had a chance at making history, but he vetoed it. Oh, Common Neffel said the New Zealand situation is what he meant. It was bound to happen. Alright then. Anyway, President Trump's Tuesday night veto of a joint resolution pulling U.S. military assistance to the Saudi-led coalition in Yemen may not have been a surprise, but the decision doesn't make it any less disappointing. Trump had the opportunity to become the first president in U.S. history to sign a war powers resolution withdrawing the United States from an unauthorized overseas conflict, the sort of groundbreaking moment that would have appealed to his ego and sense of place in history. Yeah. And I will say that I want to just comment that this particular writer right here almost sounds more like a non-interventionist libertarian type. And that's kind of what I like about Washington Examiner, is that they are fairly unbiased with their perspective on things. Like, for example, how they criticize Brett Kavanaugh for his support of NSA spying, or his past rulings on that. That would seem supportive of it. Instead, Trump did the easy thing. He threw in his chips with the Saudis yet again. Oh boy. The freaking Saudis of all countries right there. Despite the colossal failure Riyadh's quagmire in Yemen has become, Trump in effect transformed himself into a battering ram for the Saudis, laying on the tracks in order to stop a bipartisan bullet train advocating for a U.S. withdrawal from reaching the station. This, of course, is not all about Trump, but rather what Trump's veto represents. Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates already believe they have the United States over a barrel and hold most of the leverage in the relationship with Washington. Right, for example of how we're so reliant on their oil and so on and so forth. That would be one example that I can immediately think of. Saudi and Emirati officials look at what's going on in Washington and see an administration and a Congress deep into a maximum pressure campaign against Iran that relies in large part on cooperation from the Gulf states. Now, as far as Iran goes, like, I don't know what your take is on Rational Outlaw, but I think that at best we should not be involved at all, and at worst we should like keep the economic sanctions at with them, because I honestly don't trust Iran to not do something with what they say that their nuclear technology, that they are going to supposedly use it for nuclear power, but I don't know if I trust them on that part right there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. But was there any particular unique opinion that you had on it?
No, as far as when it comes to the Middle East, I like to stay out of the Middle East as much as possible because, quite frankly, for one, the U.S. involvement in the Middle East has just made things worse because getting rid of dictators actually made things worse for us because now there's more violent leaders within those countries, some of the countries in the Middle East, and leaving some of the dictators up where they would have been better for us and for the rest of the Western world.
Yeah, and nowadays you have the Irani leaders calling out to the people of Iran saying "Death to America" and so on and so forth. And one could almost wonder if these tensions with Iran, these current tensions with Iran, are in any way caused by what happened in the 70s. I cannot remember what the exact details are of what Carter done in Iran, but I would have to read that again. Essentially, the Shah got replaced. That's what I roughly remember about it.
Mm-hmm.
Josco is in the chat, says, "Hey, how's it going?" Pretty good, Josco. They have used the situation to their advantage as any clever state would, cooperating with the sanctions regime, buying American-made weapons, pumping oil at consistent rates, and building up goodwill in the process. It should be noted that U.S. participation in Yemen's civil war was started by former President Barack Obama. Oh boy. So, I knew about Libya, but I did not know about every single foreign campaign that Obama participated in. But here's another one. Who thought throwing Riyadh a bone would alleviate some of the Saudi anger over Washington's nuclear talks with Iran? Riyadh gladly played along. The most elementary questions, however, were either skirted or not asked. Is Saudi Arabia's war against the Houthis in Yemen a war the U.S. should even be involved with? Are the Houthis direct threats to U.S. national security? How would supporting the Saudi... It's not like they mentioned ISIS at all. I know that in particular ISIS is a physical existential, or at least was a physical existential threat on the United States, as they claim credit for the San Bernardino and Pulse nightclub shootings and all that other stuff. But as far as this goes, to answer your question, Mr. whoever the writer is, Daniel DePetris, to answer your question, I say no, by my layman's observation. How would supporting the Saudi and UAE in their air campaign affect the fight against Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula? Will the carnage and vacuum of authority increase, and if so, will the anarchy provide Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula with more space to expand and more time to ingratiate itself into local communities? And by the way, when this article is talking about anarchy, by the way, ANCAPs, they're not talking about the existence of no government. They're talking about anarchy as in chaos. They're talking about that definition. Is what I'm reading anyways. Although I probably just mentioned a no duh type thing. Hello, Ghost Entertainment in the chat. Is Saudi Arabia's war America's war? And is any of this legal or constitutional without Congress weighing in and signing off? Saudi Arabia's war America's war? And is any of this legal or constitutional without Congress weighing in and signing off? I would say overall it's seemingly not constitutional, but just from the surface. Um,
I think it might be because all I know is Congress has the right to declare war, officially declare war, but I think the president can end it.
yeah.
But I have to see.
Well, he's not ending the war. He's vetoing. I don't know. Was it Congress's order specifically to end the war? Um,
I'm not sure about ending wars, but I
says
know Congress has is the ones to vote to go to war officially.
yeah. It just says joint resolution pulling U.S. military assistance to the Saudi-led coalition Yemen uh, out. Well, it doesn't say necessarily that it was like by Congress or anything like that. It was just a joint resolution by different parties and from Trump, and Trump vetoed it. We got some activity in the chat here, by the way. Red Feather says the problem is the CIA helped create Al Qaeda and ISIS. Yeah, as I would have to actually read into that, but I give the benefit of the doubt that that is essentially true. The common Nephil, yep, essentially power is up for grabs. And Pumpkin Rose says, yeah, I understand that they have no idea what anarchy means, trust me. Well, I don't know. I still trust Washington Examiner right here. They're using like the colloquial, I guess, definition of anarchy, one could say. 4 years removed, Yemen is a pit of misery with poverty, starvation, cholera, death, broken glass, rubble, tears, and extremism sweeping the land.
I mean, which Muslim country isn't?
Yeah.
I think the only one that is like somewhat modernized is isn't it Saudi Arabia, I think.
Yeah, Saudi Arabia, and there are like some smaller countries as well that are like trying to modernize and that they are trying to make these massive skyscrapers and whatnot. But places like Syria and Iraq and Iran, not very advanced. Josco asks, I missed a lot of the stream. What is all this referring to? We're talking about Trump not pulling out of Yemen, essentially, Josco. And Common Nephil says, when a current power structure shows it's in decline, it gives rise to opportunists who will use whatever means to seize power. And hello, Toxic Threads. The U.S. has contributed to this awful situation by refueling Saudi aircraft up until last fall, selling munitions to the Royal Saudi Air Force, giving Riyadh the benefit of the doubt, and refusing to hold it accountable when the same mistakes are made over and over again. Trump could have issued a much overdue correction by fully removing the U.S. from a conflict it had no business being involved with from the beginning. This is a man, after all, who campaigned on extricating the U.S. from endless wars with no strategic purpose. Signing the War Powers Resolution Tuesday would have been a win-win-win situation. A win for the president, for the country, and for the Yemeni people. He chose a different route. The veto is one more error in judgment for a foreign policy establishment in Washington that can't seem to kick its addiction to meaningless foreign misadventures. End of article. And yeah, I do have to agree. It's just another sign of Trump going back on his word. But color me surprised. That's typically what politicians will do on at least half, if not all, half, if not most of their proposals, their policy proposals. Trump campaigned on being a non-interventionist, and he's proving that to be kind of opposite. The reason why a lot of people voted for Trump originally is because of the thoughts of him being a non-interventionist. Like, for example, the whole Syria issue. Hillary Clinton says in the debate, I want to establish a no-fly zone over Syria. And then there's the one general in a congressional hearing that said that would require a war with Russia. And that essentially scared everybody to want to vote for Trump. Well, not everybody, but you get my point. And so that was one of the issues that people voted for Trump over Hillary. And Trump is just backing out of that. especially when he's playing with fire on Syria.
Well, I'd say he's a mixture. I mean, because obviously there's this Yemen thing pulling support out of the whole Yemen conflict. Then there's what was the other conflict we got out of recently that Trump had us get out of? I forget which.
I do not know what conflict is specifically that he ordered that we get out of.
I can't remember.
Not sure
but it seems he's back and forth on the whole intervention and non-interventionalist. I would say he's probably more like a seemingly moderate, maybe interventionalist. Like he's not a full-blown interventionalist, it seems.
You wouldn't say he's as bad as Bush or Obama?
I wouldn't say he's as bad as them.
But he still is fairly bad?
No, I would say he's not great, but not absolutely terrible. I mean, obviously, I would want to have no intervention whatsoever unless it's absolute threat to the United States, perhaps.
But he would not be as good as someone like Rand or Ron Paul.
Yeah, he wouldn't be as good as them on that side.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Neffel, and it's hard to fight a group who is willing to kill themselves for power, says Red Feather. Going to catch up on a little bit on this chat. And Neffel says, yep, desperation and ambition go hand in hand. And this guy named Angel in the chat says Syria was advanced before Obama attacked Syria with terrorists. Okay. Hello, Trainer McCurry. And Comment Neffel says more. The more things change, the more they stay the same. That's almost an on the surface, that's almost an oxymoronic statement, but I get what you mean right there, Common Neffel. I get the point that you're
yes, Red Feather saying, I thought we did pull out of Syria. Did we not?
Red Feather, yeah. She says in the chat, Trump was going to pull out of Syria, and they all gave him shit then. He is damned if he does and damned if he doesn't.
Oh, yeah, that's true. But, so wait, we didn't officially pull out? Because I thought we did.
Yeah, I thought I recalled the idea being flirted by the Trump administration, but still. Comment Neffel says, in other words, Trump is in a den of vipers. Well, I wouldn't exactly say that Trump is a dove in that den of vipers, but I guess so, Neffel.
I mean, yeah, Trump gets hit with a lot of shit. It doesn't matter what he does with it. I mean, it's not even just the Democrats. Also, a lot of Republicans will fight against him because they just don't like him.
Right. Although I will say that the Freedom Caucus fighting against him and all of his Trumpian Republicans on the whole healthcare issue was very justified.
Mm-hmm.
Trump has too many neocons in his administration, and says Angel. And Josco also says he is surrounded by people who want war. Red Feather says, I don't think we pulled all troops, but most. Not sure. Regarding Syria, I think is what it means. And Neffel says he is a hawk, just less of a hawk. Alright then. And I'm going to be continuing on with this next article. It's also from the Washington Examiner, saying, what Trump's Yemen veto reveals about forever wars. And this is like a commentary on the issue of foreign wars in general, so let's dive right into this. All of us non-interventionists and just general libertarians.
Mm-hmm.
President Trump said he was against forever wars in his State of the Union. Great nations do not fight endless wars. He also made a point of shifting U.S. policy in the Middle East, calling for withdrawals from both Afghanistan and Syria. Even over the objections of his then Defense Secretary Jim Mattis, who would resign over the disagreement. But Trump was not against forever wars on Tuesday when presented with bipartisan legislation to end U.S. involvement in Yemen, evoking the War Powers Act. He vetoed it, arguing that forever wars are within his constitutional power. And it says legislation, bipartisan legislation, so I can only presume that it did come from Congress ultimately. So I just want to comment on that regarding what I said earlier. All right. As he put it in a letter to the Senate, This resolution is an unnecessary, dangerous attempt to weaken my constitutional authorities, endangering the lives of American citizens and brave service members, both today and in the future. Of course, it's unclear just where Trump thinks his constitutional authority to engage in conflicts abroad comes from. Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, after all, makes it clear that only Congress has the power to declare war. Alright, and this is kind of what you said a little bit earlier, Rash, saying that he doesn't have the authority to declare war just unilaterally, but can he refuse to end a war unilaterally? Can he continue it after it's already been declared by itself? Which I still think that maybe there should be some restriction on that front, but that's, of my knowledge so far, is not how our Constitution and so forth are set up. The president, instead, has the power to direct the military to engage only after such a declaration. Supporters of U.S. involvement in Yemen, however, have argued that the U.S. isn't technically engaged in the conflict because it only provides logistical military support and, of course, authorizes billions of dollars in arms sales to the Saudi-led coalition. Yeah, and that makes it much better. Although, actually, I will say that it does make it a little bit better because it's not like American lives are in danger or dying in the name of this, but still, you're in cooperation with Saudi Arabia. You're in cahoots with Saudi Arabia, an unholy alliance that we need to get out in the first place. And you're just continuing that by, not pulling out all support on the Yemen conflict and so forth.
And using taxpayer dollars in the billions.
Exactly. But such shadowy activities are directly linked to the conflict, even if there are no ground troops and they have real consequences. The 4-year civil war, waged with U.S. support, has caused a humanitarian crisis, left thousands of civilians dead, some at the hands to the very airstrikes the U.S. was assisting with, and failed to produce meaningful steps toward peace. That seems to be exactly the sort of involvement that the founders intended to leave in the hands of Congress. As Alexander Hamilton explained in Federalist Number 69, 69 in 1788. The President is to be Commander-in-Chief of the Army and Navy of the United States. In this respect, his authority would be nominally the same with that of the King of Great Britain, but in substance much inferior to it. It would amount to nothing more than the supreme command and direction of the military and naval forces. As First General and Admiral of the Confederacy, while that of the British King extends to the declaring of war and to the raising and regulating of fleets and armies, all which by the Constitution under consideration would appertain to the legislature. Alright? The Constitution explicitly delegates to Congress the power to decide which conflicts the U.S. engages. By the founders' design, the executive can only act after lawmakers make their decision. Presidents do not have the sole discretion to engage in military operations. If Trump is serious about reconsidering U.S. engagement abroad and preventing the endless conflicts he has warned about, that interest cannot be limited simply to the areas where he, through indifference, misunderstanding, or design, finds it useful. It also cannot be his decision alone. The one thing that Trump is right on is that an end to forever wars would be a limit on his power, but that's a limit written into the Constitution, and one that lawmakers have neglected to enforce. End of article. Yeah, because generally speaking, people in Washington are a bunch of hawks. I think we've only been on for like 48 minutes. I think that maybe I'll just select another article. But any other commentary you would like to add, Rash, before I find another subject to talk about?
No, I don't think there's really anything else to add.
All right. So this kind of caught my interest right here. It's another article from Washington Examiner talking essentially about the North Korea negotiations to try and de-nuke them, essentially. Pumpkin, okay, so to catch up here in the chat a little bit, Neffel says that's true, Angel, and Pumpkin Rose says, Angel, It ultimately doesn't matter who is in any office. Nothing changes. The government does what's in the interest of government. And Joskos ups that. And Common Neffel says, sadly, too many foreign interests also have a stake in our government that benefit from these endless wars. Yep. That's why I have to get out of the unholy alliance of Saudi Arabia and others.
As for government not changing, I had to disagree with that a little bit. Governments can change. I mean, governments have actually changed in the past. For example, Sweden used to be actually going towards more of a socialist economy back in its past, and actually got more economic freedom. Like, I think it was around in the 70s, they were going the way of Venezuela almost, and then they turned around and started freeing up their market. So actually, yeah, governments can change. It just has to be, people have
It's
to
very rare,
force
though.
the government to change. There have to be a constant watch on your government.
It's just fairly rare, I would say.
Yes, yes, it's difficult. I'm not saying it isn't difficult. It's just that's, you have to have a constant watch on it.
Red Feather says in the chat it was Afghanistan we pulled out of, I believe. Okay, so she's kind of commenting on something that you said earlier when you were trying to recall which conflict it was that Trump officially pulled out of. It might have been that one, but I'm not for certain. No one benefits from endless wars except the manufacturers of the equipment for both sides, says Red Feather. And Common Neffel says, by extension, and the bankers and key investors. Red Feather says, true. And Angel in the chat says, John Bolton and Pompeo are neocons. John Bolton, I am pretty sure is. As far as Pompeo goes, though, I'll just have to give the benefit of the doubt on that, because I don't know the specific details of what he's advocated for. But John Bolton, yeah, I know that he has advocated for like an outright physical conflict in North Korea, which that is really playing with fire. Like, that's like playing with fire next to a gasoline drum right there, for fuck's sake. North Korea wants Pompeo replaced as chief nuclear negotiator as Kim test fires new tactical weapon. Now, I don't really care about what North Korea has to say about wanting who to be replaced as a nuclear negotiator or whatever, but what really caught my attention was the later part of that title, saying that as Kim test fires new tactical weapon. Just more evidence as to how Kim Jong-un and the Korean government, or North Korean government, is like breaking their part of the deal. The supposed denuclearization is not officially North Korea getting rid of their nukes. More precisely, the denuclearization is supposed to be North Korea agreeing that they will no longer test, that they won't do any further tests on their nuclear capabilities. And I do remember like reading an article much earlier, like I think it was last year actually, saying that they essentially broke that. I think it was actually around July 4th that they decided to still continue their own nuclear testing, which was a real slap in the face to us, and just, yeah, real pity. And now here they are again breaking that deal.
Hello, I mean, it's not really much of a surprise. It's North Korea. Of course they're going to do it.
Brandon Paget, how are you doing? And then Common Neffel in the chat says, it is only a matter of time before things get so bad we may see the rise of a strong-arm leader that is very much the same level as Caesar. Perhaps, Neffel. So anyway, how long is the article? It's, excuse me. It's kind of lengthy. It's just a little bit longer than the Common Washington Examiner article. Shot across. Okay, Angel says I am North Korean expert. All right, so strut your intellect on this as we go reading through this article, sir. Shot across the bow. North Korea is turning up the pressure on President Trump to break the deadlock over efforts to reach an agreement in which Pyongyang would give up its nuclear and long-range missile arsenal, signaling its discontent with the test of what it called a new type tactical guided weapon. The test, Thursday Korea time, was personally supervised by Kim Jong-un, according to the state-run Korean Central News Agency, which said Kim mounted an observation post to observe the short-range weapon in action. The design indexes of the tactical guided weapon, whose advantages are appreciated for the peculiar mode of guiding flight and the load of a powerful warhead, were perfectly verified at the test fire conducted in various modes of firing at different targets, said KCNA. Okay. Doesn't violate the ban. Huh? It doesn't violate the ban. How so? How so, I wonder? The description of the weapon as tactical seems to indicate it is a relatively short-range rocket or missile system. Okay. Well, then maybe the ban should, extend to include short-range missiles and rockets and whatnot, which would not violate North Korea's self-imposed moratorium on ICBM or missile testing, but it still sends a message, says Harry Kazianis, Korea expert at the Center for the National Interest. While we don't know the exact weapon system that North Korea recently tested, this does serve as a useful reminder of one critical fact. Chairman Kim Jong-un never promised to stop testing all weapons in his military arsenal, just nuclear weapons and ICBMs that have the potential to hit the U.S. homeland, says Kazianis. Kim is trying to make a statement to the Trump administration that his military potential is growing by the day and that his regime is becoming frustrated with Washington's lack of flexibility in recent negotiations. Sadly, we are only one ICBM test away from another crisis with Pyongyang, and these smaller tests only bring us closer to such a moment. I don't know. I thought I remembered the test last year being an ICBM specific test, but maybe there's a slight possibility that it was actually a short range test. I don't know.
Oh, Angel says North Korea wants sanctions release for denuke step by step period. One sanctions for one denuke until complete denuclearization, but the U.S. wants first complete denuclearization, then sanctions release.
That's the problem. Last year were no tests at all. Yeah, sure? I mean,
Yeah, I think I've heard something about that being the problem with the U.S. and North Korea.
I'll have to look at it again, but I do recall reading an article talking about essentially around the 4th of July that they were testing more nukes, that they were doing more tests. Kim over Pompeo. In another sign of North Korea's frustration with President Trump's all-or-nothing negotiating strategy, a senior North Korean official blamed Secretary of State Mike Pompeo for the collapse of the Hanoi summit in February, suggesting he be replaced with someone who is more careful and mature. You're talking about Trump being the one to make that decision. Are you sure that somebody who isn't very mature to select somebody that is more mature than himself? I don't know. Angel says that must be fake news. I'll have to pull up the specific show that I had hosted around that time, talking about how they were breaking their end of the deal. Kwon Jong-gun, who heads the North Korea Foreign Ministry's Department of American Affairs, accused Pompeo of self-indulgence and reckless remarks. I am afraid that if Pompeo engages in the talks again, the table will be lousy once again and the talks will become entangled, Kwon said, according to a KCNA report. Mullen endorses Trump's tough line. At an event sponsored by the Arms Control Association this week, former Joint Chiefs Chairman, retired Administrator Mike Mullen, said that Trump is trying to achieve, what Trump is trying to achieve is exactly right. I actually admire President Trump for sitting down with the guy, said Mullen, who served under Presidents George W. Bush and Barack Obama. Line up all the other conventions, all the other presidents, and we're nowhere with North Korea. Excuse me. Sorry about that.
I mean, he's right. The other presidents had in no any kind of success with pushing North Korea to do anything. Trump is the only one that's been able to actually do something. Whether it'll actually come to eventually denuclearization or not, it's a start of something at least.
You can't test nukes with that earthquake, and launching a missile would also be detected by the USA. Such thing didn't happen in 2018. Um, as far as the testing, like causing an earthquake, I mean, I wouldn't be. I don't know if we would be able to feel it all the way on this side of the globe. As far as being detected, well, of course it was detected by the USA. That's how the one article that I have to pull up again was able to know this information to report on it. Um, I actually, if you asked me to pick a camp, I would pick I would pick CVID as the goal, said Mullen, using the acronym for Complete, Verifiable, and Irreversible Dismantlement of North Korea's nuclear program. I'm only going to be happy with this when this guy doesn't have his finger on that trigger, he said, because he believes that if Kim felt he was about to be overthrown, he'd pull that trigger. Good Thursday morning and welcome to Jamie McIntyre's Daily on Defense, written and compiled by Washington Examiner, National Security Senior Writer Jamie. I'm not going to read that. That's probably just details about how the writings went. Happening today. President Trump and First Lady Melania Trump host the Wounded Warrior Project. Wait, what?
How did we get on the Wounded Warrior Project?
I have no idea. I think it might be moving on to different subjects. I'm going to link this particular article in the description box if any of you are curious about reading the rest of this article, but I think I'm just going to leave it right there because all this is like unrelated to talking about North Korea, which was what I was mainly wanting to talk about. Alright. But anyway, anything in further that you have to say, Rash?
Well, as far as North Korea, I guess it's obviously going to take time and it's not going to be right away. But I would say what Trump has done is a good start, and hopefully, although for few reasons, but hopefully, if Trump does get his second term, perhaps he can hopefully eventually lead to the help denuclearization of North Korea. I think if he was to get maybe another term, he might have a longer chance of being able to do that. Because I think he's the only one, at least as far as I know right now, that might be able to persuade Kim Jong Un to eventually go to denuclearization. Because no other president, no leaders anywhere, whether it's the United States or Europe or whatever, has been able to communicate with North Korea in the way he has.
Yep. Typically taking a more hardline stance on it, I would say. Let's see. Migrant caravan. Elon Musk helps Flint. Response to Melissa Carley. Political icons. Category 4 Hurricane. More Kavanaugh. Oprah on shot your abortion. Chemnitz attacks. Trump's tariffs. Twitter atheists. Should Trump pull out of Iraq and Syria? Christian Bakers. Brett Kavanaugh. SCOTUS. Iran. Here we are. Denuclearization was a farce all along. This was the particular episode that I'm referring to. So, North Korea expanding missile plant report. Okay, so I was remembering not so correctly. They weren't testing nukes, really. They were expanding a plant was what they were. So, that's I will say that is my mistake right there, Angel. So, just FYI on that. I was remembering it incorrectly. They weren't testing, but they were like expanding Their missile plant is what they were.
Hmm.
And Toxic Thread says in the chat, South Korea desperately wants North Korea. Just stopped and they love Donald Trump, so I know. Weird. What?
Is that? Are you trying to say that they like Trump, the South Korea, or something?
Just stopped and they love Donald Trump, so I know. Weird. I think that might lack some punctuation or something, or it was a typo, because that was a little bit of a confusing statement right there, Toxic Threads.
Hmm.
South Korea people protest all the time in support of peace with North. They love Trump. My son-in-law is in South Korea. Alright, I see what you mean. They might protest Trump, but it's kind of odd, actually, because I remember that there was this video of somebody, like, interviewing a whole bunch of South Koreans, asking them of how worried they were or not of the possibility of North Korea, like, actually flinging a missile anywhere at anyone. Voice. Sorry, says Toxic Threads. I see. She was using voice to chat.
Oh yeah, I know the problems with that. I've had major problems with that sometimes.
So, they actually only have been live for about an hour. Protesting for Trump demanding peace, says Toxic Threads. Alright. I think I'm going to, like, wrap up this program here soon, unless there's something else that you wanted to add, Rational Outlaw.
No, I think that's all I can put in. So.
Well, alright. So, kind of ending off this episode with a whimper, but I tried to, like, come off swinging at the very beginning of this stream. So, to all of y'all who are watching, watch the stream at the very beginning, like, tell me how well I did with the opening and whatnot, because I was, like, trying to open up with the first subject without having the articles pre-read, is what I'm meaning. Is what I'm trying to say right there. If I was, like, if it was cringy or something like that, well then, yeah, comment down below. It's interesting. Good job, guys. Thank you, Toxic Threads. But anyway, that's, pull up OBS. That's, all that we have to say. I'm the Dark Conservatarian, and, well, actually, Rational Outlaw, any plugs you want to add or anything like that?
You can follow me on my YouTube channel at Rational Outlaw. I'm also on Twitter, Facebook, all a bunch of different social media. So, and I make mostly political and social commentary videos.
All right. And so I'm the Dark Conservatarian, and this is my guest co-host, Rational Outlaw. He might become an official co-host, who knows, but that is for further consideration. But anyway, y'all have a good day. See you later. God bless.